Hey guys, I am much lower down. I feel like you are looking down on me right now. It's because I want to get comfortable. This video is going to be really long and I just want to have a little chatty, definitely not little video, not little chit chat video, like long chitty chatty video about Girl Defined. I think the last time I talked about them, let's actually check when the last time I talked about them was. Oh my god. It's like a blast from the past. I did 3 videos on them, all in kind of short succession in 2018. So that was 6 years ago, literally like as I started my YouTube channel. I think I started in 2018 in like June. So I did one in August, November, and then another one in November. It's time to come back because there's been some interesting revelations and interesting things have happened. I don't think I have to talk about who Girl Defined are, but I'm going to give a little spark notes. We have Bethany and Kristen from the Girl Defined Ministries. They are 2 extremely Christian girls, and this is nothing against religion or religious people, but they are like fundamental Christians, the most extreme of Christianity, and they make videos that have been reacted to by the likes of Cody Co, even Trixie Mattel. We had like a bunch of people reacting to their content for many different reasons, but just mainly because they're so extreme. Like Bethany didn't kiss her husband Dave until their wedding day, like when they said their vows and they said I do, that's when they had the first kiss of all time, which that's not even in the Bible. Even most fundamental Christians that don't have sex before marriage will kiss before marriage or hold hands before marriage, but no. And they talked about how they weren't allowed to be in a room alone with their partner before they got married, not even in a car, or they might get tempted. There was obviously that classic video that Cody Co and Noelle reacted to that was like, these are the type of guys that you avoid, and they had like Mr. Struggle, guys who just constantly struggle. There's been a lot happening with Girl Defined Ministries. They've released some books on modesty, books on sex, books on all sorts of different things, and they're usually just like basically PDF files. And they've also done videos on like modesty. I'm pretty sure that was like their first video that they kind of like blew up on, was how to make clothes more modest.
Of course, it's not easy to dress modest and fashionable, but it can totally be done. For us, as Christian girls, modesty has to start in the heart. It's not about a list of rules. It's not about legalism. It's about us honoring God in every area of our lives. We're going to show you some of our secrets for dressing modest and fashionable. It can be really hard to find modest shirts right off the rack, but with a little creativity, you can make a lot of them work. Low-cut shirts. You can add a cami underneath, you can add a scarf on top, or a button-up underneath. Shirts without enough coverage. You could add a layer underneath, you can add a denim jacket on top, or you could put a cardigan over it. Shirts that are tight in the chest area, a great option is to add a scarf on top. Shirts that are too short or on the edge, you could add a cami underneath to add some length, or you could add an actual layer underneath. And shirts that aren't fixable, just stitch them. A good saying is, when in doubt, go without.
And then their views on their main channel got really low. I think people stopped reacting to their videos as much, and then even if they did, people would watch the reaction rather than watching the original video, and that's kind of how we ended up in this position. So Girl Defined, they're still on about 158,000 subscribers, and they post every like week or so, yeah, about weekly, and they get on average between 1 and 10,000 views, on average 3 to 4,000, and it's still topics such as 5 lies about motherhood that most Christian women believe, why the kitchen is actually an empowering place for women, from abandonment, abuse, and sex work to freedom in Christ. Should we get off social media? I mean, they've literally built their whole careers on social media, so I hope they acknowledge that. Are Trump, Biden, and politics dooming Christian women to anxiety? Struggles of being a Christian YouTube couple with Paul and Morgan. That's another couple that I don't even want to touch with a 10-foot pole. They've even got, should Christian women read Colleen Hoover books? So that's obviously still the content they make. Now, Bethany has a separate YouTube channel with Dave called Dave and Bethany. Very interesting that his name is first, despite her being the more famous one out of the couple. Is that like a Christian, like man comes first way? They posted a video 2 months ago, and then the one before that was 3 years ago, which was about how people used to think that Dave went to a conversion camp, like a gay conversion camp, and he had to set the record straight that he didn't. And then a video before that was 4 years ago, we're having a baby. So they haven't been posting pretty regularly on this channel, but they did post 2 months ago, and that does play into today's story. So the views on the main channel have been pretty low for Girl Defined. They don't even seem to be as close as they used to be. They don't really film much content together as much because apparently they're both busy, which I'm sure they are, but it's very interesting because they used to be very like this. And then you can kind of tell that Kristen and Bethany don't really agree on things anymore. Like, I don't know if that's just me you can tell that they've taken slightly different paths in their fundamental Christianity, and they just don't really agree anymore. And I think that's maybe why they don't film as much content together anymore, because they're on kind of different pages with it. Why am I moving my hand so much? So Bethany is the person I'm going to talk about the most in this video, because Kristen seems to have just kind of faded out to just being kind of on the internet, but mainly just living her life offline. So Bethany has moved to more short form content on like Instagram Reels and TikTok, and she also is making courses, and then making courses on how to make courses so that you can make money and be a 6-figure Christian woman just like she is. Who is messaging me? Please give me a break. And then she's talking about sex more, which is crazy because she literally didn't kiss until her wedding day. So it's crazy that we're now getting advice on sex from Bethany. I was gonna say Bethany Motor. That's not who we're talking about today. We're talking about Bethy. When they first got married, they were like, whoopee, yay, we can start having sex. And they started having sex, and they realized, wow, we haven't done this for 30 years. And it's kind of bad because they haven't done it for 30 years. So it's gonna take a minute to obviously learn how to do things. But also, in fundamental Christianity, in the purity culture, there is so much shame around sex that Bethany and Kristen have both contributed to, that doesn't allow people to even think about enjoying sex. It's like you wait this whole time to get married and start having sex. But a lot of it is just like having sex to have kids, having sex because that's what's required of a marriage, blah, blah, blah. I'm never thinking about like having sex to enjoy having sex. How many times am I going to say the word sex? So they realized very quickly that the purity culture that they both paid into is not paying them back, and it's making their lives really miserable. So Bethany would refer to herself as dead bones in the bedroom, and he would have to like bring the dead bones to life.
I would basically view it like, all right, Dave, it's your job to make me come alive, and I'm like coming like these dead dry bones, and he's like, all right, how am I gonna raise the dead tonight, you know? And it was just so horrible.
We already know that there is an orgasm gap between men and women, mainly in straight relationships. That's for women of all different time frames. Some women start having sex way sooner, some start having sex way later, and yet the gap is there. Okay, now when you add in someone who hasn't even kissed someone for 30 years of their life, and now suddenly has to learn how to have sex, how to make her husband enjoy it, and then how to enjoy it herself while being married and dealing with all of that. Like, I can't even begin to imagine how overwhelming that must have been. And because you don't really believe in divorce either, there's none of this like, oh, maybe we should just go our separate ways. They're kind of stuck in it now, just trying to get through it and learn how to enjoy themselves. So now that's basically what she's doing. She's talking about sex, she's doing courses about having sex, and she's now selling courses on selling courses. She's a girl boss, if I've ever seen one. So she started posting reels about how she fixed her sex life.
Don't have sex, save sex for marriage, wait. That's the message many of us heard growing up, and then we get married and we're like, okay, so is this what I waited all this time for? Sex can be so difficult and beautiful and challenging and confusing all at the same time, and many of us just feel like, where do I go for answers? Like, where do I actually go for help? Unfortunately, in the Christian community especially, there has been like a lot of silence around this issue, especially with women. And so a lot of married women feel like sex is more of a duty rather than a delight and something that they really look forward to. And especially when it comes to like the childbearing years and having young kids, it's like sex just seems like an extra burden rather than something that energizes and that you look forward to. And I want to change all of this. I want to help us as Christian women enjoy, delight, get excited about sex. And that's why I've created the ultimate sex course for Christian women. I brought together the best therapists, doctors, psychologists to bring this course to you.
And it's by shock and surprise, basically having non-godly sex. And then she now claims that God would want that for her. Like, God would want me to come. So I'm gonna start doing non-godly sex.
We've just come up with these ideas in our head that there are like certain things that are Christian and there are certain things that are not, which I even when it comes to like lingerie, it's like, oh my gosh, you'll give someone some lingerie or you'll, share about it and they're like, oh my gosh, that's just too much. And I'm like, too much? Like, you're about to get naked. What are we talking about? Or when it comes to certain moves or positions or this whole idea of like pole dancing or learning how to lap dance or whatever, it's like we've somehow come up with this box in our mind. Like, okay, this is good Christian sex. And then anything outside of that is, no, that's evil. That's like of the devil. That's like terrible,
And, there are some people in the chat who are mentioning like it's the church's fault or struggling so much. And I agree in the sense, I'm not going to say it's the church's fault. I think that it's such a hard topic, sadly. I don't know why it's a hard topic to talk about sex.
Yes.
I think it's balance of like, yes, sex with your husband, with your wife needs to be private in a lot of ways, but not so private that you literally never talk about it. And that's so, I think we're afraid that if we talk about sex, we're going to lead people into stumbling or into temptation. And I get that. And I agree that there has to be a balance, but the church, I think, and a lot of people, Christians, have gone so far to the other side of just not talking about it at all that it's damaged people. And like, we've forgotten to talk about the freedom that sex is within marriage and the fun that it is and the beauty that it is. And so, yeah, like I pray that the church, that pastors, we find a way to talk about it in an honorable way, in a beneficial way, in an educational way, without, causing people to stumble, obviously.
So that's kind of like a tangent, but
yeah,
I don't know. I hate to like categorize men and women different, but it's like women have kind of given themselves this reputation, and you see it all over the internet, of just being like less desiring. And I think we just are perpetuating that problem by giving into it rather than going like, no, naturally I might not feel like I'm desiring, but I can change that, and I'm going to do what it takes to heal my hormones and, think differently so that I can become a really sensual, erotic woman.
Because she used to be like, this is inappropriate, you shouldn't do this, don't read Colleen Hoover, don't do this, don't masturbate, don't touch yourself. And now she's like, well, if I self-cultivate before sex, I'll enjoy myself more. What do you think self-cultivation is, guys? 3, 2, 1, yep, masturbation. But if she calls it a different thing, and she says that it's for the purposes of having more uniting sex between her and her husband in a godly way, suddenly it's okay. Suddenly we're fine. So she started talking about how Christian women demonize sex and they don't enjoy it. Bear in mind, she is the one that kind of contributed to that. Every time I say something, I just take it with the caveat that like she contributed to that thought process. She shamed women for showing shoulders, knees and toes. So she contributed to this, and now she's like, I'm a victim of my own doing. So she said, it's honestly really sad how many Christian married women talk about sex in such a negative way here on Instagram. There are thousands of reels with the premise being he wants sex, and she's like, yeah, right. Why is sex so dreadful for so many women? And why do so many women rally together to laugh about how much they hate sex? Maybe because in your community, sex is a bad thing. We're fighting right now. Sex is only for the man to enjoy. Sex is for making babies. Sex is not for the woman to enjoy. Women shouldn't think about sex. They shouldn't have dirty thoughts. Shouldn't have impure thoughts. Like, everything about it is so limiting that I don't know how Bethy thinks the moment a woman gets married, boom, she's supposed to just become like a sex symbol, sexual being. You know what I mean? Like, the day before you're married, don't have impure thoughts. If you even think about sex, you're sinning. You should confess if you even have thoughts of a naked man. And then, like, the moment you say, I do, you go to your honeymoon, you should be, like, glucking on that dick. I just don't really understand what she expects, really. She also said, married ladies, if you're ready to enjoy sex in new and more pleasurable ways, or find healing and redemption in your hurting marriage, the ultimate sex course for Christian women is for you. But yeah, I guess my whole thing is these women talked about literally having impure thoughts. I think Kristen actually talked about having a masturbation addiction. Now, coming from anyone else, I'd be like, wow, like maybe you actually were addicted to it. Like you were thinking about it all the time. It was like taking over your life. When Kristen says it, I think it was just a normal amount, but to her it was like she was going to hell, right? So she went and she told her parents, and her parents were like, don't worry, God forgives you, like just don't do it again.
And they were talking specifically about different ways that we can struggle and get trapped in sexual sin, and they had mentioned masturbation, and they said, one of the ways that the enemy loves to keep us trapped is when he can convince us to believe the lie that we're the only ones who are struggling, or that there's too much shame in what we're doing to even mention it, to even get help. And so the enemy will keep us trapped in darkness, in a sense. And they said one of the most powerful steps that you can take on your journey toward really conquering the sexual sin, or getting on a path of freedom, of even battling this sin, is to bring it into the light. God wants to give us mercy and grace and boldness for us to speak up and get help. And so I started praying that God would give me the boldness and the courage to speak up, and that he would give me mercy throughout that process. And so one night I was so just feeling like I've got to do it. You know, I'm tired of this and wrestling with this alone. Like, I want to confess this. And so I went to my parents and I said, hey, can we talk? And trust me, I was terrified, like not at my parents because they're awesome, but terrified to share the struggle I'd had for years. And y'all, I shared it with them and I was crying. I mean, it was so hard. And they were so gracious and they hugged me and prayed with me and said, we love you. We want to help you walk through this. And it was like in that moment, a burden, just getting honest, bringing it into the light, a burden that I had been carrying for years.
I can't believe they just put themselves into like touching jail. Like, oh, I'm not allowed to touch myself. Do you like wash yourself in the shower? And maybe you should just wash yourself for like 10 minutes in the shower and just say you're getting extra super duper clean. Like, I don't know, like where do we draw the line? Where do we draw the line? And yeah, I just keep on thinking about how they've demonized every single lustful thought in women's heads for the last like 6 to 10 years. And then now Bethy is like, oh my God, why is no one having sex? Why am I the only one popping pussy right now?
Why am I the only one that's popping my pussy right now?
Oh, good for Bethy. Well, look, I'm glad that she's, you know, it's better late than never, really, is what I'm trying to say. They also talked about how marriage sex is hard.
I mean, the reason I talk about sex online is because of my desire for other women to know, like, there are more, like, we all have questions. We all have areas where we feel like we're not good at or we struggle in. And like I said, sometimes in the Christian world, it can be like, yes, you just need to serve each other and that's where the best sex comes from or whatever, like being, you know, whatever. There can be like these basic terms and you're like, well, we have like physically more struggles or we haven't been able to like achieve something or we're like not connecting even though we're like going through the motions and we need help with that.
I think like finding time for sex is hard. I think things can become stale or like boring after a while because you're not in that like honeymoon period. But I think in itself having sex shouldn't really be hard. It's just like all the bits around it. Like you're busy, you're having kids, you're, you know, whatever it is, like you have jobs and stuff. So that's probably the harder part. But like actual sex shouldn't really be hard because you should have learned how to come on your own. I know I'm gonna be saying some vulgar things, but like you should have been doing things on your own. You might have been doing things with other people. I don't really care. I'm neither here nor there about people wanting to save themselves for marriage, if that's what they want to do. But like, you should have understood things, maybe read some romance, watched some romance movies. I don't know, like just like not been so completely shut off to anything regarding sex and love. And then it wouldn't have been that hard. I guess what I'm saying is it's not like this gradual, right, you like learn about sex and then you like maybe touch yourself and then maybe you read some kind of romance or maybe you like watch something or whatever it is, whatever scale you have, and then you get married and then you have sex and blah blah. That's not super hard, and then you guys can just kind of work on that together, but you already have that prior knowledge. With Girl Defined, it was like no knowledge, don't ever think about sex ever in your life, you're gonna go to the depths of hell, and then suddenly, like I said, honeymoon, pop a pussy. Like, I just don't think that's how it works, and it's not gonna work like that, okay? And that's why it took them so many years of their marriage to even begin to enjoy having sex. She also talks about like how you can have, oh my god, how you can have like godly, how you should basically bring lingerie into the bedroom. I know, that's crazy. And what positions are like godly. How you can have like godly sex in godly positions. Because I guess, I don't know, in my mind, because like, as someone who's like atheist, what is a godly position to me? What do I think about? Like, what's a marriage worthy godly position? Well, I guess good old missionary is pretty godly. I can't, because the thing is, I can't even put myself in the mindset of like what a religious person would think. Because to me, it's all just the same. Like once you're having sex, like it's all the same. You know what I mean? Like you're doing it, so it doesn't really matter what position you're in. You're just doing it. So I can't even begin to like think what God would be offended by. Like if God was looking down on me having sex, what would he be like, that's weird about? Can I put myself in the mindset of God? No, that's offensive. Can I put myself in the mindset of someone who is like religious? I guess like doggy wouldn't be the best. And it's like cowgirl okay, but like reverse maybe isn't. Maybe that's like where we draw the line. I actually have a book of positions on sex. Hold on. Oh, Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, some of these are not godly at all. Some of these are so not godly. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. Some of these are not. Jesus fucking Christ. It's okay. I get how you can find yourself saying some positions are godly and some are not. Lingerie, I guess, is good. And then we have kind of the slippery slope that they talk about. And that seems to be a big talking point in purity culture, is everything's a slippery slope, right? So like you think about a man once, you might think about him naked, you might think about sex, and suddenly your body count is 100. So I don't know. It's a slippery slope. It all is.
Another thing that I think of is that, you know, we can look on at purity culture or the purity movement tones in a lot of these books and we say, wow, I do not like the way that you said that, or I do not like the way that you presented purity or the way that you presented this idea of relationships. And because we don't like their tone or the way someone is presenting something, we say, well, I'm going to kind of ditch the whole biblical model behind that because I don't like the way that you're talking. And so I think instead of saying, okay, I don't really like the way that you're talking, so I'm going to ditch everything, look a little deeper and say, is there any truth? Is there anything that should be held on to? Should I take anything that actually comes from the Bible with me and leave the other stuff behind?
We find a way to talk about it in an honorable way, in a beneficial way, in an educational way, without, causing people to stumble, obviously.
They used to be anti-masturbation, like I said, and Kristen still is. And then she also says that she used to have an addiction.
And I, hit my teen years and I started really struggling with lustful thoughts in my mind. And I was wrestling with masturbation, struggling with that. So that was something I was really struggling with. Like, it was habitual in my life and I just didn't know how to stop, like how to get help, how to get freedom, or how to find freedom. And I was struggling with a lot of the lustful thoughts in my mind and in my heart, just toward guys.
But now Bethany does, like I said, self-cultivation for education and for starting sex. Okay, so she's saying, guys, this is all in her course, by the way, right? So she's saying, guys, I have this revolutionary idea. If you self-cultivate, you will learn what makes you come. Bethy, where have you been? We've been saying this for so long. And for education and for starting sex. So she's okay with using self-cultivation. I can just imagine, no, I'm not imagining Bethy touching herself. That's really rude. I can just imagine the scenario where she's like, no, Dave, I'm touching myself, not in a non-godly way. I'm touching myself to learn. And she's just straight-faced, not enjoying herself at all. Just learning, just pure education, taking notes while she's there. And for starting sex, so I guess she's allowed to touch herself first and then so that she gets turned on to have sex with Dave. Okay, that's good. I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm not even making fun of her. I am, but I'm glad. I'm glad we're making some progress. Kristen, however, is, I think, still kind of against self-cultivation. That's what I'm going to call it from now on, I think. Because Kristen used to read romances and masturbate a lot and had a lot of shame about it. And like I said, she would confess to her parents. I think hell would actually, if hell exists, hell would have to freeze over before I went to my parents and said, hey guys, I've been doing this really shameful thing and I need help. Oh my God, we're gonna fight. Hell would actually have to freeze. And I was also never ashamed. You know what I mean? This is not something that has been a shameful thing. I was a Wattpad girly, so no shame around here. So then we had the video called We've Changed Our Mind on Modesty, where they kind of hint at maybe some of their modest ideas weren't that great. You can kind of see the difference in the way Kristen and Bethany are and how different they are because of the men they got married to. So Zach is Kristen's husband and he's probably just as religious and conservative as, and conservative I don't mean that politically, I mean that life-wise, as Kristen is. So she has kind of stayed in the same lane that she was in, whereas Bethany has changed a lot because of Dave, because Dave is a lot more liberal than her. Liberal, once again, in the lifestyle way rather than the political way. They talk about in this video actually how it seems to be that religious people are focusing on sex more than secular people.
But a big problem for me, like when Dave and I got married, I was so like hyper aware of modesty. So it kind of like the world became almost like everyone was almost like a sexual being first and foremost. Like we are sexual beings, but it almost became like I was hyper aware of everything sexual. So about me even, like I viewed myself like in such a like sexual way that, oh my goodness, if the shirt is too tight, if my shorts are too short, if something like I am just like this walking sexual temptation, or like people are just going to look at me and be like, oh, she's just like sexual, you know? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I lived in the world. So like even when Dave and I were dating and we were engaged and then we got married, I remember just like feeling the stress of like going into a restaurant and being like, oh my goodness, look, there's a girl there and she's got like a bunch of cleavage showing. It was hard for me to be present and enjoy because I just kept thinking like, oh my goodness, how can a man be at a restaurant and see the cleavage and not just be like lusting tons. So it was like always felt like this battle, and you know, and he wasn't saying that, I was putting that on him and I was putting that in the world. So my life in the world, my life was almost like this revolving around everything I was against, all the problems in the world. And it was hard to like actually live and enjoy because, oh my goodness, the billboard, oh my goodness, the mail, like all of this stuff. And I almost felt like responsible for having to like keep him from failing and to not make other people fail. And I wouldn't have said that stuff out loud, but it kind of was like like I can remember situations like that, the stress of it all. And even having conversations like during premarital counseling about this, like it was a struggle.
We are going to be godly and modest. And it became such a focus, so hyper-focused that I think in some ways we were being objectified in the 100%. Sense that we were now viewing ourselves as nothing more than sexual objects that we had to cover. We didn't even know how to look at our own curves and appreciate them in a way that was God-honoring, because it was just cover, bigger, baggier. I'm a sexual being, I'm a sexual object, and like the more I cover, the more godly I am. And like that in so many ways was the vibe of those conservative circles. And you could look around and you could just see like across the room at some of these conferences, everyone was dressed the same. Totally. It was like these floor length denim skirts.
I know, shock. Who would have guessed it? Us. We would have guessed it because we've known this. The more you hyper focus on something and not wanting to do something, the more you're going to want to do it. And that is the tea and the shade of it all, okay? It's kind of like with children. If the only time they're allowed to eat sweets is during Halloween, they're gonna binge. You can't have sex and you can't even think about sex and everything about sex is really bad. Guess what? You're gonna obsess over it. If I was saving myself for marriage, like I can imagine myself really like obsessing over it and being really upset about it. And that almost makes it worse, right? That's how diets work. Like the more you think about not wanting to eat food, the more you're gonna want to eat food. And I know there are so many people that were, for example, religious, but it was like mainly pressure from their parents or like higher ups saying you're not allowed to have sex, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to dress this way, blah blah. And if they move out for example college or university, they end up just having really unhealthy sexual relationships with people because of that obsession with finally being let loose. You know what I mean? So yeah, I agree that religious people focus on sex more than secular people. They do say multiple times that they've kind of overdone the modesty thing and that none of it was actually what the Bible said. A lot of it was what they kind of thought the Bible wanted to say.
And it was just like a whole mindset, how to view modesty, how to approach modesty. We were trying to be careful because we didn't want to put like black and white standards there, but we were saying, here's what we feel comfortable with at that point. And it kind of became like, this is the standard of modesty. We created this really trendy, cute video. A lot of stuff around this whole like brand Project Modesty started going viral. And so we just became known. People like started to even call us like the modesty ministry, which was never what we set out to do. But it just, because we were speaking up so boldly and so kind of confidently about it, people were drawn to it and hated it. Like I got married, you got married, just lived life, became moms, all this stuff. It really does change you. And as you become more mature in your understanding of the word, what the word actually says, what it doesn't say, you kind of disentangle, like you said, from, okay, what is actually true and what's something that is black and white in scripture and what is something that is a conviction and that each person, each couple, family, whatever needs to seek the Lord with.
And actually Dave, this is the first time I get heart eyes for Dave. Shout out Dave. We stand Dave around here. He buys her clothes for her birthday because he thinks that she dressed too modestly. And so he just, every birthday, will buy her some clothes that he knows she's like too afraid to buy. But he'll just buy them for her and be like, this is what you can wear.
As I got married and was actually married to a man, I had all these ideas of what modesty should look like. Wow, men are just like stumbling left and right and they're so weak and like basically we must protect them, you know, all of this stuff. So then
getting married, and my husband is like not really of those mindsets, and he's like, you know, more like we can have self-control and the Holy Spirit can empower us and we can make choices and we can choose where we go and what we look at and all of this. Obviously he's still a man, but he you know, was just like, wow, like this is like a really intense perspective. And just more even for the way I viewed myself, he was like, whoa, like just the way you walk into a room and what you think about yourself, what you think about other people, it just seems like not very healthy and very stressful and very much like so enslaving, you know, like not really living for the glory of God and freely being able to enjoy dinner. I'm like so stressed about certain things. And so he started, you know, saying like, oh, I really like when you wear like these kinds of shorts or that kind of dress. And they weren't within my modesty box. And so it started to really challenge me because I'm like, wow, I'm married to a man, and a man who I am like so often have been like concerned about not wanting to, you know, like be a temptation for, not that I thought, you know, that whole thing. I didn't think women were responsible, but I wanted to be an encouragement as a sister in Christ, all of that. And so I had to start asking myself like, wait, why do I have this conviction? Is it because I really think like all men think this way and I need to dress this way? Or like, what, why am I dressing and what am I doing? And so my husband actually for several birthdays now, we've been married for about 5 years. He loves to buy me.
This is really sweet.
He loves to buy me clothes. Wait, is this what you're thinking? What are you thinking?
Oh, I'm just thinking how he loves to buy you clothes.
Oh. I'm like, wait, what's so sweet?
Because Zach, he would never even attempt to try to buy me clothes. No, ever. But Dave like really loves to love you in this way. And 100%. I just think it's really sweet.
From when we were engaged. Yeah. I mean, he literally like from before, when we were dating and engaged, he's always loved to get me clothes, whatever thing. So he's always like reached out to my sisters to get like stuff. We made a note one time with like all of my measurements and sizes so that he would be able to go and like see and go to like shop online. And so he has always loved that. That's always been something that he's loved to do. And there have been some big wins because big misses.
He's probably thinking like the only way to get her to wear what I want is if I buy it for her like on her birthday and then she has to wear it.
So it's been really challenging though, because he like, you know, this last birthday, it's like he really enjoys things on me that he thinks are completely appropriate and classy for the public and things that I haven't worn previously. And I don't think, you know, like I talked about it on my social media and stuff, but it's like so much on a podcast to go into like this and that and like the strap or that's not the point of it. The point of it is that like it's really been challenging me.
She even did like a reel where she showed outfits that Christian women wear and then like outfits that Dave actually likes her wearing. And a lot of it is like form-fitting, tight clothing. Dave is kind of a king and I love that. And I love that Bethy ended up with someone like Dave because I think it made her confront a lot of the feelings and thoughts that were really unhealthy in her life. But that is a spoiler alert for the rest of the video. So she has the Ultimate Sex course. She has the rebrand to The Intimate Wife on Instagram. The Instagram post was, I've had the Intimate Wife created for a while now. I think I might stop posting over there and just be more strategic with the wording, using intimacy instead of, you know. So she's trying to talk about sex, but in a way that still feels godly and not very secular. And so she's still against erotic books in marriage. I wonder if she's going to change her mind on that once she reads a few things here and there. I feel like we could persuade Bethy to enjoy, what can I recommend? Bethy, you'll love Elsie Silver. No, you will. But you will enjoy Elsie Silver because it's a small town romance. I think we can get Bethy to read Elsie Silver. Guys, petition. Let's get it going. And actually, I think it will be good for educational purposes and for purposes of starting sex, right? So like self-cultivation, we had the reasons were because she wanted to learn and she wanted to start sex, right? So she wanted some kind of a starting point for having sex so she wouldn't be dead bones. So I think if we just throw in an Elsie Silver, we can use it for education. We can highlight positions that are godly and stuff, and then we can like use it to start sex. I think we can get a compromise on that. She also talks about different topics. So for example, she debates on if lube is a sin. I think it's a sin to have dry sex, is actually what I think. Using toys in marriage. Is it yay or is it a nay? I personally think it's a slay, but that's my opinion as a non-godly woman. The next, I guess, chapter of this story is the Paul and Morgan and Bethany and Dave collab. My camera's going to switch off in a minute, so let me just restart that. So we have the Paul and Morgan and Bethany and Dave collab. So actually, originally, the collab was supposed to be between Redefining, so Bethany and Kristen, and Paul and Morgan, but Kristen's too busy. They couldn't organize a time frame together. But essentially, Paul and Morgan have done this like new series where they spend 24 hours with someone who is kind of like usually religious, but just spending time with a different content creator. My mouth is so dry. And I'm not going to talk about every single aspect of the video, but it's very interesting, and I do recommend watching it because it's very interesting. But Paul starts kind of calling out Dave's Christianity levels, and this is where we all kind of, you know, we had one of these moments where we were like, what's going on? But apparently Dave has been cursing. Dave's been throwing in a fuck. It reminds me of Miranda Cosgrove, where she was like, I do cuss a little.
I actually do cuss a little.
Do you?
Also, yeah.
What's your favorite curse word?
Probably
And so yeah, he cusses a little. Paul just keeps on kind of calling him out on like his Christianity levels, and Dave pushes back and like silences him. When I say Paul was dragged, he was scalped.
You, from talking to you briefly, would be the type of Christian that I would push back on. Like,
all the time. Well, you're not the only one.
say like, yeah, we started hanging out. I was like, hey, Dave, it's the cussing, man. Like, why are you cussing? And then I maybe would quote a Bible verse like, let no unwholesome talk come out of your mouth.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, oh, I didn't hear what he said. Did he just cuss at me?
shut up, mother.
Oh, wow.
When someone says, well, what does the Bible say? I typically will hear a certain type of what I would call biblicism underlying that, a theory of the Bible that often we just take as self-evidently true. This is what the Bible is. A lot of this stuff is actually, it's more difficult when you actually get down to the conversations. I have found it's easy for each side. Oh, you're a fundamentalist. Oh, you're a progressive. It's easy to kind of hurl like, oh, progressives are just relativists, or fundamentalists are just dogmatists. But the reality is, I think we all have beliefs that we think are true, and we all have relativisms operating as well. When your view is one that the Bible should just be this clear thing we all sort of have access to, and the Holy Spirit just teaches us what to believe, well, you got tons of groups out there who all claim the Holy Spirit as their teacher, coming to different conclusions.
A lot of groups, but you do see a lot of unity as well around the fundamental doctrines. And then there, to me at least, and then you see the splitting with the secondary issues, and that's one of the goals of this series. But yeah, man, you're a deep guy. Have you ever, you're familiar with the expression, don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out?
I've heard a version of
I feel like some deconstructionists would fit into that.
Were you silent or were you silenced?
They do talk about their views on modesty then versus now. So biblical truth versus what their opinions were and why their views on modesty have changed. Bethany brought up again how relaxed Dave is about modesty rules. Bethany also talks about not wanting to control her husband anymore. She used to be very obsessed with him, like not going to the gym, not dressing, slutty for the gym. She used to be very obsessed with controlling that, and now she's given him free reign. She's like, he's allowed to go to the gym and exercise, and people are allowed to see him. She does talk about how she used to be super obsessed with other women all the time. Like, they would go to a restaurant and see a woman, and she would be panicking, thinking like, oh my god, how are these men handling seeing a woman in a tight t-shirt? Whereas like her husband's just like, la 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 la. Like, he just doesn't. So I think he's helped her see how like men aren't these victims that women are throwing their boobs at. They're able to control themselves if they want to. And I think that's really helped her to become a much more reasonable person. And Paul asks if they regret kind of affecting people negatively, or kind of do they think that they did harm to people through all their different videos, and they kind of talk about that. And they constantly try and avoid the word deconstruction in religion, because they think it's like a thread, like you pull on one string and all of religion just falls apart. But they do talk about, their different opinions, how they've changed over the years, but they try to also avoid saying that they've caused harm to people. They kind of discuss deconstruction versus disentanglement as if any of that matters. Like, the label you put on something doesn't matter. It's what you're doing and the action that matters. And they did ask Bethany if she would ever deconstruct, and she said it won't happen. Then they talk about how Dave was raised really religious and read the Bible front to back, but he does seek advice and enlightenment from outside of the faith, and that she had been open to it because it's actually really beneficial. She finds it also beneficial to their relationship that he seeks kind of outside counsel. And I'm getting a bit of like an idea here. Something is happening to Dave. And we need to know. She said, I want peace in my life, and so for that she goes to God. But she said that he doesn't. And Morgan asks, what will you do about your kids? You guys have kids together, but you seem to have two different opinions on faith right now. And she said, he led us to a more healthy church, and that was a compromise I was willing to make with him. And he doesn't take religion away from my kids, our kids. But there's that insinuation that he's not really in the faith anymore. And she does say that Dave is like the most healthy, amazing man, and he'll be a great kind of dad to some older kids later on. Like, obviously he's a good dad now, but like in the future as well, he'll be super healthy for them. He's a good Christian man and dad, blah, 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 very healthy. Like, she seems to be very complimentary of him, despite him clearly not having the same level of faith as her anymore. There are so many scenes where Paul seems really insecure around Dave, and Dave just exudes like strong, healthy man energy. And Paul's not that. And apparently the most pushback they've gotten for their change of opinions has been from Christians. They talk about, you know, the Intimate Wife Instagram and sex, and how she's been getting pushback on certain posts, like for example the Thanksgiving post, which if you guys know about that one, you know about that one. She didn't realize how controversial talking about intimacy is, but like they literally made it controversial. Like Bethy and Kristen contributed to how controversial it was to talk about intimacy, and now she's like, oh my god, I didn't realize how controversial it would be to talk about intimacy. Interesting. They also talk about how a lot of people will say like, I hope Morgan finds happiness, Morgan being Paul's wife. I hope Dave finds happiness, because they don't want them to be with Bethy and Paul because they think they're toxic. So it's weird that they, you know, acknowledge that that's a thing that people think about. And they also talk about haters, and we see a bit of a something here. Bethy talks about how she feels like Dave is against her when he sides with the haters, and I had my jaw on the floor when I was hearing that. And apparently he's been in the subreddits, like talking to people that don't agree with God Defined. That's crazy to me.
The stuff online, I think the part that gets like the comments and all of the messages, like I'm the villain, you know. And I think the only time it gets frustrating for me is if just being honest, is like when he's like, it starts interacting with them, and sometimes I feel like starts like, oh, like they're actually really nice people and all of this, and almost like it feels like it's now like them against me. And it's less of like he's not upset or mad at me or anything. It's just more like, oh, we should be sympathetic. But at the end of the day, it's like, in some of these cases, I feel like these people really do want they do want to see our relationship fall apart. Sure. Even though they might be like, we hope you and Bethany stay together, they don't really hope that. Right. And that's kind of become apparent with a lot of these people that it's not. And so I think that's frustrating, because I really don't believe they have pure motives or pure intentions or really care about either of us. Right. And so it's, to me, that's frustrating if there is, and this just be like being real. I want to feel like my man is like standing up for me, and like he is like, you know, forget them. They're like, why are they coming after my girl? And so when you're like compassionate toward them, it's kind of like, how could you? Yeah, makes me like, I feel bad. Like I choose to, but it's hard.
Yeah, so in order to deal with that, because I don't want to, compromise my own integrity by dropping the fact that I think that a lot of these people are not as evil as sometimes we talk about on the one hand, but I also do want to be a very strong, rock for Bethany and stand up for her as her husband and all that. So typically my solution has been just to not have those ongoing conversations.
And the way he responds is that he just doesn't want to compromise his integrity, and if he doesn't think they're all evil, then he won't say that he thinks they're all evil, whereas Bethy wants him to say, they're all evil, babe, don't worry about what they're saying. And Paul said they probably see you as more progressive, and Dave said they're probably right.
Yeah, I think they kind of see, from some of the videos I watched, I think they kind of see you as more progressive in your views and more open-minded, where they would
probably right.
He's had such good one-liners in this video. They also talk about Cody Cohen, how he started kind of like the big reactions to God Defined, and Dave like smirks at the camera.
People who have made videos about us, Cody Cohen, he kind of started this all off with like Girl Defined, his video as like,
I know he's enjoyed a Cody Cohen video in the past. I know he has. Dave also said that haters might tell you things about yourself that people in your life won't and you don't see. Like, he's such like a logical man. He also said, you decided to play the us versus them game. have integrity, to hear criticism about yourself. He is just on it with the one-liners. I love it. And he says that he sees himself in some of the Redditors. So it's not like an us versus them. He sees some common traits. So then because of that, oh my God, we have so much more to go through. Let's move over to Dave and Bethany. They did a YouTube video called Our Most Open Marriage Conversation Yet on the Girl Defined channel, where they talk about her oversharing in the relationship, counseling, how he seeks non-faith-based counseling and she seeks faith-based counseling, and just kind of how their relationship has changed throughout the years and how they're a little bit more progressive. Then we had a bit of a wah wah. You know what I mean? Like, it got a little bit serious. So Dave started posting things on Instagram that were really concerning. He had a live stream where he talked about suicidal ideation.
And then it kind of started to get worse, and I started to have these suicidal fantasies. They call it passive suicidal ideation, where you're not really about to end your life, but you are fantasizing about it. Hey Jude, don't be afraid. And I like the word fantasy because my fantasy had to do not really with me being so, feeling so worthless necessarily. That probably was in there somewhere. But what made my fantasy compelling was how bad Bethany would feel if I were no longer here. And that I had some moments where those suicidal fantasies were more dramatic, and that's when I basically decided I need to do something about this. And so I went and got some therapy. Wonderful therapist.
But then he did a clarification on that and how it's not because of Bethy, it's because of like outside things.
One of the things that I think is important is to help clarify what I am saying and what I'm not saying about myself. I think there is a misconception, and I can take responsibility for not quite communicating in a way that gave the fullest picture, but I think there's a misconception that what I shared about having suicidal ideation, about difficulty managing my sense of self, a lot of that stuff, that was, it wasn't brought about by Bethany. I just want to make that very, very clear, because I think there's a sense, a lot of times we, it's easy to view relationships as sort of having a hierarchy, like there's a victim and a victimizer, right? And while that holds true and is probably the closest and best interpretation for many relationships, it certainly, in my opinion, does not hold true for all relationships. But I think that a lot of times when we see certain things that fit into our categories of what we've come to think of or read about as toxic behavior, or in this case, suicidal ideation, like what causes it and things like that, I think it's really easy to just kind of jump into, well, okay, we know who the players are. We know the victim is, he's the one who's having the thoughts, we know who the victimizer must be, because he's having these thoughts after they have difficult conversations. So whatever's going on in the relationship or the marriage, it's got to be, going at that, sort of that angle, victimizer, victim. And I'm here to say that is not the best interpretation, or in this case, a very good interpretation at all of the case.
So then a lot of people are obviously really concerned for him. They were just wondering, like, what's going on? How is he like on Instagram Live talking about this? She's not addressing it. She's just on Instagram talking about is lube okay in a relationship or not? So then we had a bit of a weird blip again. They reviewed the Barbie movie together and she hated it, but he actually liked it. And he said it was like a really interesting, like, psychological evaluation, felt like there was a lot of like philosophical things to talk about in it. Like he was so into the Barbie movie. Multiple times he was like, I was asking like, if she's interested in watching it, do you want to go watch it? Do you want to go watch it with your girls? Like he wanted her to watch the Barbie movie because he wants her to be a feminist. Like I know it for a fact. I know it without him having to say it. He wants her to be a feminist. There were so many think pieces when the Barbie movie came out about how it's not feminist enough, that it's only talking about like the basics of feminism. But I think movies like that are so important for children, but also people like Bethany, people that were super sheltered, who have never even like seen a good side of feminism, what it can do for you as a woman. And I think like Bethany, if she calls herself a feminist once in her life, the Barbie movie has succeeded. And so is Dave. And at one point I found it really funny because Bethany was so against the Barbie movie because it was so like mean to men. And she said, I would just hate how it would make our son feel. And like, I would hate for people to like hate on men because of my son. And Dave literally just turned around and was like, he'll be okay.
All of the guys in the real world and in Barbie land, every single last one is portrayed as like literally a complete idiot. Like beyond
much.
idiot.
Yeah, pretty much.
Like he's such an idiot. It's almost like, you know.
I mean, here's the thing though. You know, we've heard these statistics and stuff. Women are outstripping men in so many different sectors in our society, you know, education and careers and stuff. It's like men are very much falling behind. It seems like there's a crisis of identity amongst many men. So there are movements that are sort of capturing a lot of these men that are really stereotypical, that are like the manosphere that I've heard of. I don't know much about it, but it's this sort of idea that if the feminists say this, you sort of say the opposite. Like the feminists say, they have all the power. And so you're like, it's good to have power. You basically just affirm that sort of thing. And there are a lot of groups like that. And there are a lot of guys that treat the women that they're with like that. I mean, very much like, you're here to serve me, either, and in both ways. The weak sort of nice guy approach, where I'm building my life around you and your happiness is the most important thing in my life, and our relationship is the most important thing. That's a very weak position to be in. And just as much as the, jerk version, where it's like, you need to serve me and stuff. But the thing is, it seems to me like that very much exists. Men like that, we're like that sometimes.
I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, we had an interview with Nancy Piercy, and you can listen to it. It's a few episodes back, all on the toxic war on masculinity. And I think that that's true. I think that we've swung so far to this side of, like, not just that women want to have equality with men, but they want men have to be like scum and men have to go down. And like Nancy Piercy was saying, like, it's all these jokes, like testosterone is a cancer and we have to basically like weed out men from men are the problem.
No,
and
it's not.
I think of raising a son, and it's like, I do not want to raise him basically viewing his manhood and his masculinity as a problem.
Oh, I think you'll be okay.
He'll live. He'll live, sister. He'll be fine. And so people were slowly, dare I say, standing Dave. Like, I think with the, him buying her clothes, and then with the Paula Morgan vlog, and then with the Barbie movie, people were standing Dave. And so then we have the Dave deconstruction. Dun, dun, dun. So obviously they do the 24 hours with Paul and Morgan. Then they react to it. So Dave and Bethany reacted 24 hours with Paul and Morgan. They seem really happy at the beginning and different to what they used to be like around each other. They used to be so awkward around each other. Now they're super lovey, touchy-feely, blah, blah, blah. It makes me really happy for them, actually.
All right, let's blow the lid off this month.
Babe!
I got you on camera smiling in a cute and sexy way when I cursed.
Okay, let's do this.
Come on. It's third time's a charm. We've already restarted a couple times because we hate ourselves.
We were the stiffest grandmas you've ever seen in your life.
Anyway, I'm not going to act out the grandma, but
we're not stiff people, but we've tried to film this 3 times, and we're not ourselves at all. We're just like this. We're like, and then Paul and Morgan came, and how was yours?
I'm locked 13 layers in my mind castle.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I have no space in here.
Okay, that's because
Are we filming?
We don't ever film together. We need to film more.
We're so bad at this, but we'll get better.
Okay, this was when we went out on our very first date ever. Well, my dream, I told you this, and this might be really forward. On our very first date ever, I told you about how I thought we were really special and unique, because we were really good friends at that point.
and how I thought we could have like a YouTube channel or do something like that. And we've dabbled
We have tried along the way a little bit.
But it's still my dream.
He said that he wasn't supposed to be in the Paul and Morgan video as much as he was. It was supposed to be between, obviously, Kristen and Bethany, but she wasn't there. So he took over, and then suddenly it became like this big conversation on his faith, which was really weird. But it made them confront things that they've been avoiding for a while. So haters, their faith, etc. He says that he's been circling deconstruction, and Bethany is actually not against it. She's just not deconstructing herself. Now, he jokes multiple times about like how he's not an atheist. He's just moving away from certain aspects and questioning things that he doesn't agree with. And he says that he has been having a really tough time with faith, identity in Christ, not wanting Christianity to exist even, because it would make his life so much easier if it just didn't exist as a whole. Is he still a good man despite not being Christian? And a lot of advice from kind of faith-based counselors was, you just need to believe more, just do more work. And he always just felt like, well, I've been doing work and I still don't believe. And the more work I do, the less I believe. So what do I do here? He said that it was really hard to face it while being like in the Christian world, marriage, community, family, friends, work. And like the collab just made him face it even more, which was kind of hard at the time, but good now. He did apologize to Beth because he felt like he lied to her when they first met, because even prior to the marriage, he was already deconstructing, but just wasn't super honest about it. But she claims that she had an inkling, but she loved him anyway. So, you know, Bethy did get really emotional during this video because she said that she still loves him, but had to face all of this because she loves him. And it's kind of interesting for her, I think, because like, would she have loved an atheist? Like, would she have fallen in love with an atheist? No. Did she fall in love with him under false pretenses? Kind of. But it is making her face her very strong opinions on atheists. And I think if he becomes a full atheist, this is going to be a revolution. Like, I'm gonna whoop. I'm going to whoop and cheer, because I think it's going to make her face a lot of the very unhealthy feelings that she has had towards the secular world. Bethy continually, you know, talks about how she likes being religious and she likes having the faith in Jesus, but she is having to face all of that because he's deconstructing. But Dave, on the other hand, really likes the self-accountability and the self-growth and the self-discipline that comes with not putting everything in God's hands. So he's massive on like integrity and accountability and self-work, self-improvement, whereas she's big on like, it's in God's hands, Jesus has got me. So clearly two very different personalities, but they're super attentive towards each other throughout this video, and it's really nice to see. And there's even a really cute bit at the 36th minute is what I wrote in the notes, so you'll see that.
I think you have to look at your life and anyone at any time. I mean, there are people who have a lot more in common than the two of us and who are way more miserable, you know? It's like we don't have that in common right now, but the way that we, I don't know, it's just like your focus and where you're going and what you're doing. And I just, at least that's what I choose to do.
Okay, I want to say Bethany, by far the highlight of the highlights of 24 Hours with Bethany was Bethany.
No.
Paul and Morgan were great, of course, and but I just, and Bethany was, you were stunning, and just the kindness that you showed, and the just your understanding heart and your ability to handle all of the differences that we have and still speak in such a, you know, just a lovely way about me and about our relationship. It was really beautiful. I'm so grateful for Bethany and her. She's really blown me away with just her kindness and her open heart. And
I love you so much.
You're a hell of a woman,
babe.
And Dave actually got her to watch her first reaction video to Girl Defined, and it was Zelf on the Shelf. I do love me a Zelf on the Shelf, and he gives them a lot of love. Beth actually likes them too, and they've been like commenting on each other's videos, which is so sweet. And obviously Zelf on the Shelf reacted to all this content and was super happy. Zelf on the Shelf have posted like a reel with Bethy, so I think there's gonna be some content coming together, and I like, this is my Super Bowl. I'm so excited. And they do talk about the difference between a critic and a hater, which was a continuation of the conversation around the dinner that they had, and how he likes to take on the criticism and how you can use haters to better yourself. But what we've gathered from all of this is that Bethy likes having sex, Dave is deconstructing, and he might be an atheist king in a minute, And their relationship is like healthier than ever. Like, I love this for them, for us, for everyone. Like, I would have never expected in my lifetime to see this happen. Like, this is my Super Bowl. It really is. Now, I'm not saying Bethy is a perfect person. I'm not saying Dave is a perfect person, but I'm saying this is progress. And it's a lot of progress in a short amount of time. So this is my deep dive on the Girl Defined saga recently and all the updates. And yeah, I think that's it. Subscribe with the bell icon for engagement. I'll see you guys in my next one. Bye, guys.